Chapter 1: Prelude to Conflict, the Galactic Republic and Separatist Origins. 4 centuries. The galaxy was governed by the Galactic Republic, an expansive alliance of thousands of star systems, unified by diplomacy, peace, and the guardianship of the Jedi Order. From the gleaming towers of Coruscant, democracy flourished, connecting distant planets through the Galactic Senate, a vibrant hub of culture, trade, and political discourse. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Worlds far from the Republic's capital began to feel forgotten, exploited by corporations and ignored by an increasingly self-serving political elite. Systems in the Outer Rim struggled under poverty, corruption, and lawlessness, while powerful trade federations and corporate conglomerates accumulated immense wealth, wielding undue influence within the Senate itself. Discontent grew strongest among those who felt unheard. Political leader Count Dooku, a distinguished Jedi Master once revered for his wisdom and diplomacy, began voicing the frustration of the marginalized worlds. His powerful charisma drew countless followers, senators, planetary rulers, and influential merchants, creating a political rift within the Republic that widened by the day. These tensions came to a critical point when the Republic Senate passed restrictive trade laws and increased taxation on Outer Rim worlds. Policies intended to curtail corporate power, but inadvertently harming struggling systems. Feeling betrayed, multiple systems declared their secession from the Galactic Republic, uniting under the charismatic leadership of Count Dooku into what became known as the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the Separatists. Initially, this movement promised independence, fairness, and liberation from exploitation, but unknown to most, darker influences were at work, manipulating events behind the scenes. At the very heart of this intrigue was Count Dooku himself, who harbored secrets far deeper and darker than mere political discontent. Count Dooku's fall from the Jedi Order. Dooku was once among the most esteemed Jedi Masters, renowned for his formidable skill, profound wisdom, and unwavering dedication to justice. A respected diplomat, his voice carried weight across the galaxy, mediating disputes and preserving peace. His Padawan, Qui-Gon Jinn, reflected his ideals: a maverick, deeply principled, unafraid to challenge authority when morality demanded it. Yet, as the Republic grew increasingly corrupt, Dooku's faith in its ideals wavered. He saw injustice flourishing under a Senate more interested in political power than in serving its citizens. Even the Jedi Council, in his eyes, had grown complacent, blindly following political mandates, abandoning their ancient role as independent guardians of peace. His disillusionment intensified after the tragic death of his beloved apprentice, Qui-Gon Jinn, at the hands of Darth Maul, a Sith apprentice long thought extinct. Qui-Gon's death exposed the Jedi Council's blindness to the dark side's resurgence. Feeling the Jedi Order had become servants of a corrupt political system and betrayed by their inability to foresee the Sith's return, Dooku quietly resigned from the Jedi Order, his departure shocking his former colleagues. In his self-imposed exile, Dooku sought answers, exploring forbidden texts and ancient secrets, desperate to comprehend the resurgence of darkness. It was in this vulnerable period that he encountered Darth Sidious, a shadowy figure who promised him a means to dismantle the corrupted Republic. Seduced by visions of justice and control, Dooku pledged himself to Sidious's teachings, secretly becoming Darth Tyrannus' apprentice to the Dark Lord of the Sith, now fully aligned with darkness. Dooku began orchestrating a grand conspiracy, fueling divisions between star systems, and transforming legitimate grievances into widespread rebellion against the Republic, unknowingly setting the stage for a devastating war orchestrated by his Sith master, Sifo-Dyas, and the ordering of the clone army as tensions grew. Another Jedi Master, Sifo-Dyas, began receiving troubling visions through the Force visions of war, devastation and destruction on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Haunted by these prophetic dreams, Sifo-Dyas pleaded with the Jedi Council to prepare. But the Council, wary of acting on uncertain visions, refused his urgent warnings. Determined to avert disaster, Sifo-Dyas secretly traveled to the distant planet of Kamino, renowned for their advanced cloning technology. There, acting alone and driven by desperation, he commissioned the Kaminoans to create a vast army of clone soldiers, ensuring the Republic would have a means of defense if war became unavoidable. This decision, made without the Council's knowledge, would have profound consequences. Somehow, Darth Sidious became aware of Sifo-Dyas' secret plan, and through Count Dooku, ensured control of this clandestine army. Sifo-Dyas soon vanished under mysterious circumstances, presumed killed, leaving behind only questions and the ominous army he had commissioned under Dooku's careful orchestrations. The Kaminoans continued creating millions of clone soldiers, each based on the genetic template of the feared bounty hunter, Jango Fett. Fett was chosen personally by Dooku, not only for his fighting skills but his ruthless discipline. Unbeknownst to the Jedi, each clone carried within them a secreter, hidden purpose, planted by Sidious himself, ready to be unleashed when the time came. Palpatine's rise to power in the political heart of Coruscant. Senator Sheev, Palpatine of Naboo, observed these unfolding events with secret satisfaction. Publicly, Palpatine portrayed himself as a humble servant of democracy, charismatic yet modest, dedicated to unity and peace. Beneath this mask, however, lay a dark truth. Palpatine himself was Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord who had spent decades quietly manipulating galactic events to ascend to ultimate power. Palpatine's cunning had been carefully hidden beneath layers of political deception. Through calculated political maneuvers, he orchestrated crises, such as the invasion of Naboo by the Trade Federation, manipulating public sentiment to secure his election as Chancellor. His soft-spoken voice, humble manner, and appearance of unwavering integrity made him beloved across the Republic. Behind closed doors, Palpatine cultivated divisions and escalated tensions, quietly ensuring diplomatic failures between the Republic and separatist sympathizers. Every crisis brought him greater emergency powers, steadily increasing his control over the Senate and laying the groundwork for the final collapse of democracy. His relationship with Dooku, carefully hidden, became his sharpest tool. By simultaneously controlling both sides of the emerging conflict, Palpatine ensured the Clone Wars would become a carefully staged performance each battle. Every loss, another step toward his ultimate goal, the transformation of the Republic into his personal empire, ruled by fear, enforced by strength, and governed entirely by the dark side of the Force. As armies assembled, worlds chose sides, and tensions reached breaking points. The galaxy unknowingly marched toward a conflict, carefully engineered by Jedi Masters grappled with uncertainty, senators struggled with trust, and ordinary citizens lived in fear, unaware they were pawns in a galactic game of chess played by the most cunning Sith Lord in history. Thus, the stage was set for the galaxy's darkest days, the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan's discovery, and the Battle of Geonosis. The Republic stood at the precipice of war. The Jedi Council became increasingly unsettled. Disappearance and secrecy had become the new norm, and whispers of a growing separatist army had reached the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. It was in this climate of unease that the Council received troubling news. Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo, a voice of reason in the Senate and a prominent opponent of militarization, had narrowly survived an assassination attempt on Coruscant. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan, Anakin Skywalker, were assigned as her protectors, but they quickly became embroiled in a deeper conspiracy. Following a second assassination attempt, Obi-Wan traced clues to a distant and mysterious ocean-covered world, Kamino, a planet erased entirely from the Jedi archives. Confused yet determined, Obi-Wan set course alone, stepping unknowingly into the heart of a hidden conspiracy that would change the galaxy forever. Kamino. The hidden army landing on Kamino's storm-ravaged surface, Obi-Wan was greeted by the elegant, mysterious Kaminoans, who had long been awaiting the Jedi's arrival. Confused, Obi-Wan discovered the staggering truth. An immense army of cloned soldiers, millions strong, created over a decade earlier under the secret orders of Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas. Yet Obi-Wan knew Sifo-Dyas had died around the time this army had supposedly been ordered, deepening the mystery and unsettling him further as he toured the facility. Obi-Wan met Jango Fett, the bounty hunter whose DNA served as the template for the entire army. Obi-Wan sensed something deeply troubling behind Fett's confident exterior. After a tense conversation, Fett's hostility confirmed Obi-Wan's suspicions. Realizing that Fett was connected to Senator Amidala's assassination attempts, Obi-Wan attempted to arrest him. Fett escaped after a fierce confrontation, fleeing Kamino with his son Boba. Determined, Obi-Wan tracked Fett through hyperspace, arriving at the barren desert world of Geonosis, a remote industrial planet concealed by rocky mountains and deep, dusty valleys. There, Obi-Wan discovered an even more shocking revelation. Count Dooku himself, presiding over a secret gathering of thousands of separatist leaders. openly plotting war against the Republic. Geonosis, it seemed, had become the nexus of Dooku's separatist revolution, and the birthplace of an army far more fearsome than any clone soldier. Capture on Geonosis's and deep within Geonosis's catacomb-like architecture. Obi-Wan witnessed Dooku aligning the Trade Federation, Techno-Union, Banking Clan, and Commerce Guilds into a formidable military alliance. Dooku promised unlimited battle droids, warships, and advanced weaponry, all fueled by endless credits provided by these powerful corporate entities. Obi-Wan swiftly transmitted his discoveries to the Jedi Council, but before he could escape, he was captured by Droidicus and imprisoned by Dooku face to face. Dooku presented Obi-Wan with a chilling revelation that a Sith Lord, Darth Sidious, was secretly controlling the Republic Senate. Offering an alliance, Dooku implored Obi-Wan to join him in defeating this hidden Sith. Obi-Wan, however, refused, unaware that Dooku himself was Darth Sidious's trusted apprentice. The captured Jedi was sentenced to execution, his fate set to serve as a symbolic start to the separatist rebellion against Republic tyranny. But Obi-Wan's message had already reached Coruscant, sparking an urgent decision by the Jedi Council to mount an immediate rescue, marking the beginning of an inevitable war. The rescue and the Anakin Skywalker, along with Senator Amit, arrived secretly on Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan, but their attempt was short-lived. Captured, the three prisoners found themselves chained inside a colossal Geonosian arena, the air thick with anticipation from tens of thousands of spectators, eager for spectacle and bloodshed. As monstrous beasts were released to execute them, the trio fought bravely, but hope seemed lost until, in a dramatic moment, Master Mace Windu ignited his violet blade, declaring the Jedi's presence and signaling an attack. Hundreds of Jedi leaped into the arena, engaging thousands of battle droids in a chaotic battle, lightsabers blazing brightly against relentless waves of mechanical soldiers. Yet, even with their formidable skills, the Jedi were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Just when defeat seemed certain, a massive fleet descended from the Geonosian skies, bringing salvation and war in the form of the clone army discovered by Obi-Wan. Master Yoda had arrived, bringing legions of clone troopers eager to fight. On behalf of the Republic, the Battle of Geonosis, the scorching sands of Geonosis, the first battle of a galaxy-wide war, erupted with violent intensity. Massive starships landed, deploying battalions of white-armored clones who moved in disciplined formations, their precision cutting through endless ranks of battle droids. Explosions shook the landscape as Republic tanks and gunships faced off against towering separatist machines and swarms of fighters. Amidst this chaos, Obi-Wan and Anakin pursued Count Dooku into a remote hangar, desperately attempting to stop his escape. Engaging the Sith Lord in a fierce duel, Anakin's brashness cost him dearly, losing his arm to Dooku's swift blade. Obi-Wan was wounded, leaving both Jedi at the mercy of their powerful opponent. But salvation arrived in the small, hunched form of Master Yoda, whose presence alone radiated wisdom and power. Yoda and Dooku dueled spectacularly, a clash of legendary masters embodying both the Jedi and Sith ideologies. Despite Yoda's formidable prowess, Dooku escaped aboard his ship, fleeing to continue orchestrating the conflict that had now fully ignited. Consequences and the onset of war. Though Geonosis was declared a Republic victory, the victory felt hollow. The Jedi Order had been transformed overnight from peacekeepers to generals. Countless clone soldiers, bred solely for war, marched obediently toward uncertain fates. Anakin's injuries symbolized the personal losses and pain that awaited the galaxy. In the Senate, Chancellor Palpatine capitalized on the crisis, receiving emergency powers to mobilize the clone army fully, effectively assuming near control over the Republic's future. Yet no one noticed the cold smile beneath his humble facade, smile that hinted at his true intentions, and the darkness already engulfing the galaxy. Back in the Jedi Temple, the Council reflected uneasily. The galaxy now stood irrevocably changed. Jedi Masters felt the stirring darkness of the Force as they reluctantly donned the roles of commanders, accepting that their long-held peace had become an illusion. The Clone Wars had begun, set in motion by forces unseen and misunderstood. Systems across the galaxy chose sides, driven by ideals, fear, or ambition. Ordinary citizens, soldiers, and Jedi alike would soon find themselves trapped within a conflict designed from its inception by Sith manipulation, setting the stage for unprecedented loss, suffering, heroism, and betrayal. Thus began one of the darkest chapters in galactic history, as the Clone Wars consumed the Republic, leading inexorably toward its fateful end, transforming the galaxy forever. Chapter 2: Early Battles and Rising Tensions. Visio Battles and Early Victories. The war spreads across the galaxy as the dust of Geonosis settled. The galaxy was thrust into total war. Hundreds of systems declared allegiance to the Separatists, while thousands more clung to the Republic, hoping for stability amidst chaos. With countless fronts now active across the galaxy, the Jedi found themselves transformed into military commanders, leading clone battalions into unfamiliar battles. War consumed every corner of space. Planets that once thrived in peace now bore the scars of laser fire, burned forests, bombed cities, and smoldering landscapes. Despite their best efforts, the Jedi were no longer peacekeepers. They were generals in a war they had never wished for, leading an army they had never asked for. Among these Jedi was Anakin Skywalker. Once a brash young Padawan with unmatched power in the Force, Anakin was now a knight. Fresh from the Battle of Geonosis, he was promoted for his courage, but not without concern. Many masters worried about his anger, impulsivity, and deep attachment to those he cared for. And yet Anakin would become the Republic's greatest weapon, and ultimately its greatest tragedy. The Battle of Christophsis, of the earliest major battles of the Clone Wars, erupted on Christophsis crystalline, planet of sharp skyscrapers and gleaming streets. Christophsis had been seized by separatist forces, cutting off vital supply routes. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi were dispatched to liberate it with a small clone force. But they quickly discovered that the Separatists had deployed a powerful blockade and a large droid army. Facing overwhelming odds, the Republic troops held defensive lines for days. Streets became trenches, and buildings collapsed into rubble as battle droids poured in wave after wave. Republic forces were pushed to their limits, and supplies dwindled. Tensions rose not only with the droids, but within the command itself. During the siege, an ambitious admiral named Trench nearly cornered the Republic fleet in orbit. But Anakin, showing early signs of his strategic brilliance and reckless creativity, disobeyed orders and personally led a stealth mission to destroy Trench's flagship. The plan succeeded, granting a temporary advantage and forcing the Separatists to regroup. But just as Christophsis began to turn in the Republic's favor, Anakin received a surprise. A young Togruta girl had arrived at the front lines, declaring herself his new Padawan. The arrival of Ahsoka Tano, her name was Ahsoka Tano, only 14 years old, but confident, clever, and bold. Yoda had assigned her to Anakin not just to complete her training, but to ground Anakin emotionally, to teach him patience and responsibility. At first, Anakin resisted. He believed a Padawan would only slow him down in war. But Ahsoka refused to back down. She challenged him, defied him, and most importantly, earned his respect. The pair were soon thrown into battle together, and their synergy became legendary almost instantly. The siege of Christophsis continued. With Ahsoka at his side, Anakin devised a plan to sneak behind enemy lines using a stealth generator. The operation was risky, but the gamble worked. They destroyed the Separatist command center, and the Republic reclaimed the city. It was the first of many victories for the duo. Though often clashing in personality, their bond grew rapidly. Ahsoka admired Anakin's courage and strength. Anakin saw in her a reflection of himself, bold, defiant, and fiercely loyal. Thus began one of the most beloved Jedi partnerships. Of the war, the Battle of Teth, the Huttlet crisis. Their next mission was unconventionally and politically volatile. Jabba, the Hutt's infant son, Rota, had been kidnapped. Though a criminal overlord, Jabba's influence was vital. The Republic needed access to Hutt-controlled hyperspace lanes in the Outer Rim to gain a strategic advantage. Anakin and Ahsoka were dispatched to the jungle-covered planet Teth, where Rota was believed to be held in a Separatist-controlled monastery. The mission was secret, sensitive, and immensely dangerous, landing under fire. The clones fought uphill against entrenched Separatist droids, while Anakin and Ahsoka scaled sheer cliffs to reach the monastery. Inside, they found Rota sick and frightened but alive. The operation was complicated further when Count Dooku personally intervened, sending his assassin, Asajj Ventress, to ensure the mission's failure. Ventress, a dark side user with a burning hatred for the Jedi, engaged both Anakin and Obi-Wan in deadly duels throughout the war. Teth was the first of many. Anakin and Ahsoka escaped the monastery with Rota in hand, but were pursued relentlessly by droid forces. In a last desperate maneuver, they fled in a damaged transport and delivered the Huttlet to Jabba, just in time restoring peace and gaining the crucial trade routes for the Republic. But the mission had broader implications. Dooku had tried to frame the Jedi for Rota's kidnapping, attempting to turn Jabba against the Republic. The war, it was now clear, would not be fought only with armies, but with deception, subterfuge, and manipulation. Anakin Skywalker, the rising war hero. As the war continued, Anakin's fame grew. He won decisive victories on many fronts, from the Battle of Ryloth to space battles over Rishi and Kamino. His clone battalion, the 501st Legion, became one of the most feared units in the Republic military. Too many, Anakin Skywalker was the Jedi's greatest champion, but the Jedi Council watched him closely. He broke rules often, and his intense emotions, especially his attachments, worried the elders. Yet his results spoke for themselves. His charisma inspired loyalty. His presence turned the tide of battles, and his trust in Ahsoka created one of the most effective Jedi-Padawan duos in the war. Together, Anakin and Ahsoka represented both the hope of the Jedi and the dangerous edge of war. Every mission hardened them, every loss tested them, and as their victories increased, so did the cost of their decisions. The early days of the Clone Wars were filled with small victories and hidden consequences. The Republic believed it could win quickly. Many Jedi still believed they could protect the galaxy. But with every system liberated, another fell. With every separatist defeat, Count Dooku grew bolder, and all the while, in the shadows, Darth Sidious watched the war unfold precisely as he had planned. This war would not be won by strength alone. It would test the hearts of Jedi and soldiers alike. And though few realized it, the Clone Wars had already begun to erode the very foundation of the Republic from within. The galaxy would never be the same. General Grievous Ryloth and the clones' humanity, the rise of General Grievous while Anakin and Ahsoka's victories boosted Republic morale. A new shadow emerged on the battlefield, cold, metallic, and merciless. His name was General Grievous, Supreme Commander of the Separatist droid armies. Grievous was no ordinary tactician, a once-proud Kaleesh warrior. His body had been reshaped through gruesome cybernetic enhancement, leaving only a shriveled heart and brain beneath layers of armor and mechanical limbs. Now, he was more machine than Manand in battle. He was a monster. Under Count Dooku's tutelage, Grievous became not just a military commander, but a living weapon. With every Jedi he slaughtered, he collected lightsabers as trophies, wearing them like a twisted honor guard. His voice was gravel, his movements inhuman. Republic forces learnt to dread the sound of his mechanical breathing and his eerie, hunched silhouette. But it wasn't just his brutality that terrified. Grievous was strategically rarely fought fair. He ambushed, flanked, and destroyed without remorse. He abducted and executed Jedi. He wrecked fleets and vanished into hyperspace. before reinforcements could arrive. One of his earliest assaults changed the course of the war. The Malevolence Crisis Grievous commanded a colossal new warship. The Malevolence, a subjugator-class heavy cruiser armed with an ion pulse cannon capable of disabling entire fleets with a single blast. It didn't destroy ships through firepower, it silenced them. Communications shut down, power flickered, engines died. Then Grievous moved in for the kill. The Republic lost multiple medical convoys to this ghost ship. Jedi Master Plo Koon, a beloved leader, nearly died when his fleet was attacked. He and a handful of clone survivors drifted helplessly in the void. Hoping for rescue, Anakin Skywalker led the mission to track down and destroy the Malevolence. With Ahsoka, they located the ship and launched a dangerous assault. In a daring maneuver, Anakin flew a medical frigate directly into the Malevolence's bridge, sector-damaging the hyperdrive and forcing Grievous to flee. Though the ship was destroyed, it came at a cost. Hundreds of lives were lost in the earlier attacks. The Republic was shaken, and Grievous had made his name known across the stars. From that moment on, Grievous became a phantom presence, felt more than seen. A killer with no conscience, the face of mechanized evil. The Battle of Rilithwile. The Republic fought in the void of space. The war came brutally to the surface of countless worlds. One such world was Rilith, home to the Twi'leksa culture, proud, ancient, and vulnerable. The Separatists blockaded the planet, then invaded, devastating its cities and enslaving its people. Their goal, to use Ryloth as a base of operations in the Outer Rim. The Republic could not allow that. Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and Mace Windu led the liberation in stages. Anakin broke through the space blockade with risky maneuvers, sacrificing big ships to clear a path. Ahsoka, commanding a starfighter squadron, suffered heavy losses. It was her first real failure and it haunted her. For the first time, she understood the weight of command and the reality of war. She had given orders, and her men had died. Obi-Wan led ground forces through treacherous terrain, fighting battle droids hidden in caves and villages. Mace Windu coordinated resistance fighters on the ground, including Twi'lek freedom fighters, who had watched their homes destroyed. The liberation was successful, but the victory felt muted. The planet was ravaged, civilians were traumatized, and many clones had died in the process. Ryloth was free, but it had paid in blood. The Jedi's growing. Onaz's battles, like Ryloth, became common. The Jedi began to change. Once defenders of peace, they now fought daily. They wore armor. They issued commands. They accepted collateral damage. The Jedi Council debated quietly in their chambers, struggling to reconcile their ancient teachings with their new reality. Yoda, the wisest of them all, began to sense what others would not say. They were losing themselves. They sensed something was wrong, but they couldn't see the true cause. The dark side clouded everything. Palpatine, now Supreme Chancellor, with near total authority, offered comfort and praise. He positioned himself as the Jedi's ally, but he quietly isolated them from the Senate and the people. The Republic saw the Jedi now not as monks or scholars, but as warriors, generals, soldiers of the state, exactly as he had planned. The humanity of the clones and what of the clones? From the outside, they were identical. Same face, same armor, same purpose. But inside, they were as diverse as the galaxy itself. Clones developed personalities, preferences, humor, morality. Some painted their armor, others named themselves. Some questioned orders. Many died, never knowing freedom, on distant outposts like the Rishi Moon. Clones like Fives and Echo fought valiantly to warn the Republic of Grievous's attacks, giving their lives in silence. Their courage, their sacrifice, their humanity became clear to the Jedi who served with them. The Jedi began to see the clones not as tools, but as brothers. Some, like Captain Rex, became trusted friends. Others, like Cody, earned positions of leadership rarely granted to non-Jedi. But even in these moments of connection, a secret lay dormant inside every clone, buried deep in their minds, unseen and unquestioned. Order 66, a final command. Claire, a sleeping death sentence for the Jedi, planted by the same man who had created the war itself. The war was only beginning, but already it had changed everything. Grievous spread terror across the stars. Jedi became leaders in a war they did not start. Clones gave their lives daily, growing more human with each battle and yet bound to a destiny none could see. And above it all, Palpatine watched from the shadows, orchestrating both sides of a war that served one purpose alone: to destroy the Jedi and end the Republic. The Clone Wars were not just battles. They were slow erosion, not just of cities, but of souls. And still, no one saw the fall that was coming. Chapter 3: Shifting Alliances and Shadows of Corruption. Senate Corruption. Mandalore's crisis and Duchess Satine war without boundaries. As the Clone Wars escalated, so too did the complexity of its battlefield. No longer confined to trench lines and orbiting fleets, the war crept into the halls of government, the council chambers of once neutral planets, and the personal lives of those sworn to preserve peace. The lines between enemy and ally began to blur, and for the Jedi, morality became a shifting landscape. While lightsabers clashed on the front lines, a more subtle war played out in the Galactic Senate. Corruption in the Senate chamber. On Coruscant, once a place of spirited diplomacy, had become a theater of manipulation. Senators no longer debated ideas, they debated contracts, war budgets, and emergency powers. Every vote carried a hidden cost. Every alliance masked deeper motives. Chancellor Palpatine presided over it all with calm precision. With each new crisis, the Senate granted him further emergency authority. Under the illusion of necessity, democracy eroded. Many senators, worn by fear and the constant threat of separatist violence, saw centralization of power as stability. Behind the scenes, corruption festered. Lobbyists and corporate representatives, especially from the banking clan and trade, Federation legislation to benefit war profiteers. Supplies were misapplied. Clone soldiers were sent to the front under-equipped. Public credits were siphoned into private accounts, while refugees starved and planets burned. Senators like Padma Midwala, Bail Organa, and Mon Mothma tried to expose the rot. They formed committees, gave impassioned speeches, and begged the Chancellor to restore checks and balances. But they were outnumbered, drowned in a sea of loyalists and cowards. For every senator who stood for peace, there were 10 more who stood for profit. The Jedi begin to lose faith from their high tower within the Jedi Temple. The Jedi Council observed these changes with growing unease. They had never been politicians, but now politics shaped every move. Each time they advised the Chancellor, their words became instruments of war. Each mission assigned by the Senate felt less like diplomacy and more like occupation. Jedi were no longer mediators. They were enforcers. Mace Windu, once stoic and confident, began to question whether the Jedi had become tools of a system they could no longer trust. Yoda, wise and ancient, meditated for hours without speaking, sensing through the Force that something deeper, something darker, was taking root in the galaxy. And while the Jedi struggled with their role, a new crisis erupted, not on the battlefield, but on a planet that had long rejected war entirely. The neutral world of Mandalore, far from the battlefields of the Outer Rim. The planet Mandalore stood as a symbol of pacifism and neutrality. Once a warrior culture feared. Throughout the galaxy, Mandalore had rejected violence after years of civil war. Its capital city, Sundari, was a gleaming metropolis beneath a protective dome, elegant and ordered, reflecting its desire for peace. At the head of Mandalore's government stood Dacha Satine Kryze, a leader of unshakable idealism and unwavering conviction. She believed peace was not weakness, but strength. Under her rule, Mandalore remained independent, refusing to take sides in the Clone Wars. But not all Mandalorians shared her vision. A secretive, militant faction known as Death Watch began plotting her downfall. They saw Satine's pacifism as betrayal and sought to restore Mandalore's warrior legacy. Operating from the moon Concordia, they trained in secret, building alliances with the very powers Satine sought to avoid. Their leader was Prelude, a cunning and ruthless warrior who wielded an ancient black-bladed lightsaber, a weapon created by the first Mandalorian Jedi. Vizsla saw Death Watch as the rightful heirs of Mandalore, and he would stop at nothing to see it ruled by strength. OBI-1 and Satine, when reports of Death Watch activity reached the Republic. The Jedi Council sent an envoy to investigate. The chosen Jedi was Obi-Wan Kenobi, a decision that was far from random. Years earlier, during a diplomatic mission, Obi-Wan had spent a year on Mandalore, protecting Satine from insurgents. During that time, they developed a bond that went beyond politics. There were whispers, never confirmed, that Obi-Wan had once been willing to leave the Jedi Order for her. Now, reunited in the tense atmosphere of a planetary crisis. Their old feelings resurfaced, complicated by duty and distance. Satine, elegant and fierce, challenged Obi-Wan constantly. She despised the Republic's militarism and resented the Jedi for enabling it. Yet she trusted him, and Obi-Wan, ever composed, found himself torn between his loyalty to the Order and his heart. Their conversations were layered with unspoken history. "Had you said the word," she once told him, "I would have left everything behind." Obi-Wan quietly replied, "I know." But their personal struggle was overshadowed by the growing threat of Death Watch. The fall of Neutrality Death Watch made their move. They attacked villages, bombed transports, and assassinated political figures, designed to make Satine appear weak and incapable of defending her people. As public opinion swayed, pressure grew on Mandalore's government to abandon neutrality and join the war. Satine traveled to Coruscant to plead her case to the Senate. There, she was nearly assassinated, further reinforcing her vulnerability. Only the intervention of Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker saved her. But even on Coruscant, she was met with scorn. Senators dismissed her concerns. Some mocked her pacifism. Others used her plight to argue for Republic intervention, occupation, under the guise of stabilization. Satine returned to Mandalore, disillusioned. The Republic, she realized, was no longer interested in peace. It had become addicted to war. Obi-Wan's inner conflict, Obi-Wan's time on Mandalore, forced him to confront what the Jedi had become. He saw firsthand how war distorted values, how leaders like Satine were being crushed between empires, how love, once forbidden by Jedi doctrine, might have brought him more clarity than any council meditation ever had. He left Mandalore with a heavy heart. Satine remained behind, continuing her impossible stand against both Death Watch and the Republic. She refused to pick a side, knowing that either choice would destroy her people. And Obi-Wan, bound by duty, returned to a war that no longer felt just. A galaxy in doubt the clone. Wars were no longer just a battle of clone versus droid. They had become a conflict of ideologies, of manipulation and mistrust, of forced choices and moral compromise. The Senate, corrupted by fear and profit, blindly empowered a chancellor who asked for more power with every breath. The Jedi, once the guardians of truth, now walked a line between warriors and pawns, and planets like who dared to stand apart were punished for their independence. In the shadows, Darth Sidious smiled. Every division served his purpose. Every moral wound weakened the Republic. Every crisis drove the galaxy further from balance. In this chapter, the true cost of war begins to show. It's not just lives lost on the battlefield. It's principles lost in the Senate. It's trust lost between allies. It's love lost between two people who could never be together because peace was no longer an option. And as neutrality faded, the galaxy spiraled deeper into darkness. Battles of the Outer Rim and the Jedi's moral crossroads wore across the Outer Rim. As the Clone Wars dragged into its second year, the battlefront expanded to nearly every corner of the galaxy. While the Republic held the core worlds, The Outer Rim territories, a region of wild, underdeveloped systems, became the true crucible of the war. These worlds had limited defenses. Many were rich in resources or held vital hyperlane access. Their loyalty or subjugation could tip the balance of the war, and so they became battlegrounds. From the jungle world of Felucia, to the snowy ridges of Orto Plutonia, to the shadowy, war-torn planet of Umbara, the Republic and the Separatists clashed in brutal campaigns, fighting not just each other, but the environment, the population, and their own consciences. The Jedi sent to command clone battalions were now generals in a war that had no rules and no end in sight. The Battle of Felucia, with its giant fungal forests and brilliant alien flora, seemed almost serene from orbit. But beneath its colorful canopy lay death. The Separatists had dug in deep, constructing droid factories hidden among the terrain. General Ayla Secura led Republic forces to drive them out. Felucia became a case study in the war's quiet horror. The fighting dragged for months. Ambushes, lost supply lines, and deadly native wildlife took a heavy toll. Clone troopers, untrained for such hostile terrain, fell by the hundreds. The survivors grew weary not just from combat, but from confusion. Why were they fighting here? Why did so many die for a planet whose name they'd barely learnt? The Jedi, for all their training, struggled to their connection to the Force, weakened by the jungle's chaos and their own growing doubts. Felucia was eventually retaken, but the price was steep. No monuments were raised. No civilians cheered. Just another world scarred by war. The shadows of Umbarif Felucia was a war of attrition. Umbara was a descent into madness. The planet, cloaked in perpetual darkness, glowed only from the eerie bioluminescent light of its vegetation and the fire of its conflict. Its native population, the Umbarans, sided with the Separatists, using advanced technology unfamiliar to Republic forces. General Pong Krell, a Jedi of immense stature and reputation, was sent to lead the campaign. But from the beginning, something felt wrong. Krell dismissed the advice of clone commanders. He rejected strategic planning, pushing troopers into frontal assaults with high casualties. He barked orders without explanation. His disdain for clones was palpable. The soldiers of the 501st Legion, including Captain Rex, Fives, and Hardcase, began to question his leadership. Missions failed. Casualties skyrocketed. Brothers died for unclear objectives. Then, the ultimate betrayal, under Krell's command. One clone battalion was ordered to attack another, each side unaware the other was Republic. It was only after dozens were killed that the mistake was discovered. But it wasn't a mistake. It was a test, a manipulation, a betrayal of the worst kind. The Jedi who fell before the Fulcrell had succumbed to the dark side. He saw the Republic as doomed and planned to join Count Dooku, hoping to rise in the new order after the Jedi were destroyed. But the clones saw through him. Captain Rex, torn between duty and justice, chose the latter. Krell was arrested, tried, and executed by the very troops he once commanded. The aftermath of Umbara rippled across the ranks. For the clones, it was a devastating realization. Not all Jedi were trustworthy. Not all were heroes. Some saw them as pawns, just as the Separatists did for the Jedi Council. Krell's betrayal was a silent warning. The dark side was not just out there, it was among them. And for Palpatine, watching from his office atop Coruscant, it was a quiet confirmation. The Jedi were cracking under pressure. His plan was working. The battle for Underanier. Not all battles were fought with armies. Some were fought in alleys and marketplaces by the people themselves. Underon, a politically fractured planet, had fallen to a separatist-aligned king. But its people resisted, forming an underground militia desperate for freedom. The Jedi, unwilling to directly violate the planet's neutrality, sent Ahsoka Tano, along with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Captain Rex, to train the insurgents in secret. Among these rebels were Stila Gerrera and her brother, side-dealists at first, warriors by necessity. The Jedi trained them in tactics, sabotage, and leadership. Ahsoka, still young but wise beyond her years, formed a deep bond with Stila C. In her, the same independence and courage she herself was learning to wield. The uprising was successful. The separatist puppet regime collapsed, but Stila was killed in the final battle, and Saw Gerrera would never forget. His bitterness would evolve, in time, into militancy, and eventually extremism. Underon's liberation raised new questions. Had the Jedi done the right things? They hadn't fought, but they'd empowered a rebellion. Was that peacekeeping or just a new form of warfare? Moral decay. The Jedi had long believed in balance, in compassion, in peace through knowledge. Not power, but war had changed them. They wore armor now. They issued kill orders. They measured success by territory reclaimed and body counts reduced. Anakin Skywalker, once an idealist, now led with ruthless precision. He cared deeply for those close to him, Ahsoka, Rex, Pardon, but showed little mercy to enemies. He tortured for intel. He executed traitors. He justified every action as necessary. The Jedi Council noticed his instability, but they needed him. He was winning battles. Banned, the Republic needed victories, so they looked the other way. The clones questioned everything. The clone troopers, bred for loyalty, began to ask forbidden questions. Why were we created? Are we just tools? What happens to us after the war? They built brotherhoods. They painted armor with personal colors and names. They buried their dead with respect. They wrote stories and shared jokes, but they also mourned. They mourned every comrade lost in battle, every general they trusted who treated them like machinery, every mission that ended in silence and sand. They were growing, evolving, becoming people, and yet none of them knew what lived inside their heads. An inhibitor chip, buried, silent, waiting. The Outer Rim campaigns, shattered illusions. They showed that not every enemy wore separatist colors, that the Jedi were no longer sure of themselves, that victory could feel hollow, and that the Republic's foundation was cracking not from a single blow, but from thousands of tiny fractures, spreading invisibly until the structure collapsed. This was no longer a war for justice. It was a war for survival, and survival had a cost. Chapter 4. Secrets of the Force and Lost Legends. The Mortis Arc and Anakin's Destiny distress signal from beyond in the midst of the ever-spreading Clone Wars. A mysterious transmission echoed through space, an ancient Jedi distress signal, thought to have been decommissioned thousands of years ago. The Jedi Council, puzzled by its reappearance, dispatched a small envoy to investigate. On board the mission were 3 Jedi: Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Ahsoka Tano, the very heart of the Republic's military strength. But as their shuttle entered the coordinates, the laws of the galaxy bent, instruments failed, stars vanished, and time seemed to freeze. They awoke to find themselves on Mortis, a place unlike anything in the known universe. The world between worlds, Mortis, was not a planet, not truly. It existed outside the galaxy's flow of time and space, a realm made entirely of the Force itself. The very sky shimmered with impossible colors. Mountains floated above valleys. Day and night passed within minutes. The wind whispered in languages long forgotten. Here the Force was not an idea, was alive. Every breath, every shadow, every beam of light pulsed with ancient energy. The Jedi quickly realized they had not stumbled into a mystery of war. They had entered a mystery of the universe itself. The Father, the Son, and the Daughter on Mortis. 3 beings ruled over the balance of the Force. The Father, ancient and tired, who maintained harmony between light and dark. The Daughter, radiant and calm, embodiment of the light side, the sun. Wild and vengeful, incarnation of the dark side. These were not Sith, not Jedi. They were primordial echoes of the Force's deepest truths. The Father had summoned Anakin not by accident, but by fate. He believed Anakin was the chosen one, the one foretold in Jedi prophecy to bring balance to the Force. Mortis would test whether he was ready, but tests in this realm did not come as questions. They came as visions. Anakin's trial, the Father challenged Anakin. Can you control both light and dark? Can you tame the son and daughter not with violence, but through balance? Anakin succeeded. With a gesture of will, he subdued both siblings, something even the Father could not do. The prophecy, it seemed, was true, yet the success came with a cost. Mortis stirred things buried deep in Anakin's soul. The son, cunning and predatory, saw the future burning inside the chosen one. His fear, his love, his rage. And he showed it to Anakin. In a haunting vision, the son revealed what Anakin would one day become. A tyrant in black armor galaxies, burned in his name friends. Betrayed, dead. Anakin collapsed. Trembling, he saw it all. He believed it, and for a moment he accepted it. The son offered an alliance. Join me. Boo will overthrow the Father. We will end the Jedi and rule the galaxy. The temptation was real. The vision undeniable. But the father intervened. Memory washed away, horrified by what the son had revealed. The father made a terrible choice to preserve Anakin's destiny, to keep him from collapsing under the weight of what he'd seen. Father erased the vision from Anakin's mind. He would not remember the future. He would not remember what he would become. And so, Anakin's fear, the very fear that would one day lead to his fall, was buried again, like a fault line beneath the surface, waiting to rupture. Ahsoka's fall and rise again. Ahsoka Tano was tested on Mortis. The son, seeking leverage, kidnapped her. Twisting her mind with dark side energy, he turned her into a weapon against her friends. For the first time, Anakin fought Ahsoka not to train her, but to save her. Bond so strong, nearly shattered, and yet redemption came not from Anakin, but from the daughter, in a selfless act. The daughter sacrificed herself to bring Ahsoka back to life. Light died to preserve light. The balance of Mortis faltered, and the warning grew louder. The collapse of the realm. The father, weakened and weary, saw what was coming. His children were unbalanced. The dark side was gaining power. Mortis was no longer safe. To restore balance, he did the unthinkable. He took his own life. With his death, the realm began to collapse. The son, enraged, prepared to escape into the galaxy, to unleash his power. But Anakin stopped him. With the last of his strength, Anakin struck the son down, fulfilling the role the father had believed in, that of the chosen one, the bringer of balance. And then Mortis was gone. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka awoke in their shuttle. No time had passed. The galaxy continued, unaware that its greatest legend had just unfolded and vanished into the void. The Jedi Council never knew. When Anakin reported back to the Council, there was no mention of Mortis. No proof, no memory of the vision, just silence. The Jedi, always skeptical of prophecy, had no idea that their fate had just been shown to the man. Wiped clean, Yoda sensed something, a tremor in the Force, but even he could not place it. The Force had opened a window. The Jedi had closed it. What Mortis meant? The Mortis arc was not just a vision. It was a warning. A mirror. It showed that balance is not peace. It is conflict held in harmony. That the Jedi's rigid pursuit of light left them blind to the shadow behind them. That Anakin, for all his heroism, carried within him the seed of collapse. And that destiny is a story written in smoke scene, denied, forgotten, and yet always fulfilled. In the heart of the war, far from any battlefield, Anakin came face to face with his fate. He saw the darkness he would become. He saw the light he could preserve. He saw the galaxy begging to be saved on the cost of doing so. But the vision was taken, and so he fought on, blind to what he was truly fighting for. And as Mortis vanished behind him, so too did the last great chance to change the future. Yoda's journey and the forgotten wisdom of the Force, the growing darkness by the 3rd year of the Clone Wars. Jedi Master Yoda had seen many things, wars, empires, the rise and fall of civilizations. But what he saw now was different. It was silence in the Force, a subtle emptiness. As the war consumed more systems, and more Jedi fell in battle, the light side seemed to wane. The Force still flowed, but it had become harder to hear, louder in conflict, fainter in clarity. Jedi meditations turned restless, visions clouded, and for Yoda, one of the most powerful Force users in history, this was more than troubling. He began to sense by a shadow, not just in the galaxy, but in himself. And then the voices began. A voice from beyond, in the stillness of the Jedi Temple's meditation chamber. Yoda heard something impossible. The voice of Qui-Gon Jinn, his former student, dead for over a decade. Jedi belief held that death was final. Once the body was gone, the consciousness dissolved into the Force. But Qui-Gon's voice was unmistakable. You must go to the origin of all life, it said. You must learn what was lost. The Jedi Council was skeptical. Some suspected hallucination, stress, even a trap by the dark side. But Yoda knew the truth. He had felt it, and so, in secret, he left Coruscant alone journey to Dagobah, guided by the voice of his former apprentice. Yoda traveled to a remote, swamp-covered world, Dagobah. The planet would one day become his exile, but now it was something else. It was ancient, rich in the living Force, untouched by war or machines. In a deep cave, Yoda experienced his first test. He faced a vision not of the war or the galaxy, but of himself in the darkness. A shadow version of Yoda appeared, twisted, angry, filled with fear and arrogance. It mocked him, accused him, challenged him. This was the truth the Jedi had ignored, that even the wisest are not immune to darkness. Yoda did not fight the vision. He accepted it, and with that humility, the cave released him. The origin of the Force, his next destination, was a place unknown to most, the wellspring of life, a mysterious world of shimmering trees and glowing spirits, where the Force itself was said to have been born. There, Yoda met ethereal beings known as the Force priestesses. They were not light, not dark, not even alive in the way most beings understand. They were balance made formicos of serenity, anger, confusion, joy, and sadness. The priestesses offered Yoda a path forward, to learn how to become one with the Force after death. But this was not a gift. It was a trial, one that would push Yoda beyond knowledge, beyond training, and into the most sacred mystery the Jedi had long forgotten. The Jedi had lost their way for generations. The Jedi believed they understood the Force. They followed rules, codes, discipline. They trained warriors, taught doctrines, but in their pursuit of control, they had lost something older, something purer. The Force was not a tool, not a weapon. It was a river, flowing endlessly. One could not grasp it, only move with it, and death was not the end. Not truly. It was transition, continuation, another form of existence. Qui-Gon Jinn had rediscovered this truth on his own. Now, Yoda would walk the same path, The final trial, Moraband last test, brought Yoda to Moraband, once called Koraband, the ancient homeworld of the Sith. It was a place of death, tombs, statues, wind howling through canyons, lined with the remains of Sith lords long dead but not forgotten. Here, Yoda was confronted by illusions crafted from his deepest fears. He saw clones turning against Jedi. He saw Count Dooku offering him a seat in the new Sith Order. He saw Darth Sidious rising, triumphant. In these visions, Yoda failed, died, watched the galaxy fall, and yet he chose to continue, because even in the face of total darkness, hope must persist. The priestesses watched, and they deemed him worthy. The secret of immortality and reward for passing the trials. Yoda was taught a sacred truth. He could preserve his consciousness beyond death, not through power, not through control, but through compassion, true surrender. This was not the Sith's path where immortality came through domination and fear. This was the Jedi's forgotten truth, that true life came from letting go. And with that, the first step toward Force ghosthood was restored. Qui-Gon had begun the path. Yoda now walked it. Fully, Obi-Wan would later follow. And years later, even Anakin, in the end, would be redeemed and embraced by it. Returning to the war, when Yoda returned to Coruscant, nothing had changed, least on the surface. The Senate still debated, the Jedi still fought, the war still raged, but something within Yoda was quiet, certain, resolved. He no longer feared death. He no longer chased victory. He had glimpsed a truth far greater than the conflict around him. And yet he also knew a great darkness is coming. Already it is here. A secret never shared. Yoda kept his journey hidden from the Jedi Council. He told no one of the Force priestesses, the wellspring, or the path to immortality. Perhaps he feared it would be misused. Perhaps he knew the Jedi were not ready. Or perhaps he understood that the fall of the Jedi Order was now inevitably, and that its rebirth someday would require new wisdom. Wisdom born not of war, but of loss. In the midst of starships and sabers, politics and power, one old Jedi walked the quiet road of truth. He saw the flaw at the heart of his order. He faced his own shadow. He remembered what the Jedi had forgotten, and he learned that death was not the end. It was a doorway. Chapter 5. The Turning Tides, the Battle of Mon Cala, Zagaria's Slaves, and Ahsoka's Growth. The war evolves as the Clone Wars entered its third year. The nature of battle began to change. No longer limited to major invasions and system-wide campaigns. The war spilled into forgotten corners of the galaxy, places where political unrest, cultural divisions, and ancient grievances became weapons. But with the Jedi stretched thin, a new kind of leader began to rise. Not from the Council, not from the old guard, but from the next generation. This is where Ahsoka Tano's story begins to evolve from apprentice to commander, to something the Jedi were never prepared for. Trouble beneath the waves. The Battle of Mon Cala from Coruscant. Beneath the surface of the ocean world, Mon Cala. Civil war erupted. The death of the Mon Calamari king left a power vacuum. His son, Prince Lichar, was young and untested. The Quarren, the other dominant species on the planet, refused to recognize his rule. Separatist agents fueled their rebellion, seeking to take control of the planet's resources and shipyards. With Republic interests threatened, the Jedi intervened. Anakin, Padma Amidala, and Ahsoka descended into the ocean depths, alongside clone troopers in aquatic gear and armored diving walkers. But this was unlike any war they had fought. Underwater warfare, fighting underwater brought new danger. Visibility was limited. Movement was slowed. Every sound echoed through the currents. Droids, adapted for aquatic combat, swarmed in formations like metallic schools of fish. The Republic forces were outnumbered and unfamiliar with the terrain. Quarren soldiers ambushed them from coral reefs. Separatist weapons pulsed with sonic energy, disorienting and deadly. Anakin and Padma were separated in the chaos. Ahsoka was tasked with protecting Lichar, guiding him through narrow trenches and hidden caverns. In the darkness of the sea, Ahsoka became his shield, and for the first time she began to lead, not just fight. The prince who would be kingly, barely out of adolescence, carried the burden of leadership with hesitation. He doubted himself, his worth, his power to unite a divided people. But Ahsoka stood beside him. She didn't lecture or command. She listened, she protected, and slowly Lichar began to believe in himself. Together they rallied the Mon Calamari loyalists. Word spread that the prince was alive, resisting, and refusing to abandon his people in a final stand. Lichar stood before his enemies unarmed, declaring his right to rule, not through force, but unity. The people listened. The Quarren laid down their weapons, and Mon Cala was saved, not just by war but by leadership, by courage, by the presence of a Jedi Padawan who chose hope over destruction. Ahsoka grows in the shadows of war. That mission changed Ahsoka. She had fought before, led before, but now she had mentored, guided someone else toward their destiny. Anakin noticed. So did Obi-Wan. She was no longer just a student. She was becoming a force of her own. But the galaxy would not give her time to grow in peace. Another mission called on. This one would cut deeper. The Sigeria slave crisis. It began with a simple mystery. A colony of Togruta settlers whose own species had vanished from the planet Kiros. The settlement was found abandoned. No bodies, no bodies, no signs of resistance. The trail led to Sigeria, a powerful empire built on slavery. The Sigerians had once thrived under the Sith. After the fall of that alliance, the Jedi had outlawed slavery across the Republic. But now, with the Republic distracted by war, the slavers were rising again, seeking to rebuild their lost dominance. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka were sent to investigate. Under cover, disguises and deceptions, the three Jedis posed as slaver and slaves Anakin, pretending to sell Ahsoka and Obi-Wan to the Zergarians. For Anakin, it was personal. He had been a slave. He had felt the collar, the hunger, the helplessness. The mission stirred old wounds. Rage flickered beneath his calm surface. Ahsoka, chained and surrounded by real suffering, remained calm, observant, and deeply disturbed, not just by the conditions, but by the Republic's silence. The Jedi had been protectors, but here entire systems were enslaved while the Senate debated budgets. The mission became more than a rescue. It became a moral reckoning. The slaver queen and the collapse inside Zageria's golden palace. Anakin was offered a deal. The slaver queen admired his strength. She saw his anger. She offered him power, chance to rule, to control, to never feel weak again. He refused, but something inside him wavered. Meanwhile, Ahsoka escaped captivity and began freeing the Togruta prisoners, organizing a rebellion from within the Poldin pens. When the uprising came, it was swift, violent, and desperate. Jedi clashed with Zagarian guards. Slaves took up stolen weapons. The palace crumbled under the chaos. In the end, the slaves were freed. But something had changed. The aftermath unanswered questions. They left Zageria. The Jedi were quiet. Yes, they had won. But the cost lingered. Anakin had nearly crossed a line. Again, Obi-Wan had been tortured, left vulnerable. Ahsoka had seen her people innocent like livestock, and none of it had been prevented, because the Republic was too busy fighting a war, because the Jedi were too busy being generals, because the Senate didn't act unless a profit was at stake. Ahsoka began to ask the question. She would later ask out loud, what does it mean to be a Jedi anymore? Leadership in the face of failure still. Her resolve didn't falter. In every mission that followed. She stepped forward more confidently. She coordinated clone movements with calm clarity. She de-escalated conflicts through diplomacy, not violence. She questioned orders, not from defiance, but from wisdom. Even Anakin, proud and possessive, began giving her more freedom. She was no longer just his Padawan. She was a leader, and yet she was also walking toward heartbreak. In the ocean depths of Mon Cala, in the golden prisons of Zygeria, Ahsoka Tano was learning what it meant to lead, not through rank, not through orders, but through presence, through compassion, through the quiet decision to protect those the war had forgotten. And in doing so, she grew into the Jedi the galaxy needed, even as the Jedi Order grew blind to its own decline. The Battle of Umbara and the clones' moral awakening. New front, a new kind of darkness. The war reached the shadowy world of Umbara planet, cloaked in perpetual night, wrapped in fog, and filled with bioluminescent vegetation and toxic air, strategically positioned near vital hyperspace lanes. Umbara had pledged allegiance to the Separatists. Its conquest would not be easy. The Umbaran people were secretive, technologically advanced, and fiercely defensive. Their weaponry outclassed most Republic tech, and their capital sat deep behind hostile lines to take the planet. The Republic launched an all-out assault. The 501st Legion, led by Captain Rex and commanded temporarily not by Anakin Skywalker, but by a Jedi named General Pong Krell was sent to spearhead the invasion. It would become one of the darkest campaigns of the entire Clone Wars. The arrival of General Pong Krell was unlike any Jedi the clones had served under. A towering basilisk with 4 arms and 2 double-bladed lightsabers, he radiated power and authority. But where Anakin inspired loyalty and trust, Krell commanded obedience through fear. He disdained the clones, calling them expendable assets. He withheld battle plans. He issued direct frontal assault orders, even when alternatives existed, to the 501st. Krell was a mystery and a nightmare, but clones were trained to follow orders, and so they fought. The battle unfolds. Each assault under Krell's leadership resulted in heavy casualties. Clones died by the dozens, often for objectives that turned out to be meaningless or strategically flawed. Still, the soldiers pressed on. Rex, loyal to both the Jedi and his men, began to fracture. He questioned Krell privately, pushed for different tactics, tried to save lives without defying orders. But the gap between strategy and morality widened with each mission, and the darkness of both literal and symbolic, began to seep into their hearts. Echoes of humanity through it all. The clones remained. Brothers, Fives, bold and emotional, challenged Krell openly. Hardcase, brash but loyal, volunteered for impossible tasks without hesitation. Dogma, rule-bound and rigid, clung to orders as a way to keep the chaos at bay. They weren't just soldiers. They were individuals, each with different perspectives, temperaments, and limits. And on Umpara, all of them were pushed to their breaking points. A sinister twist the 501st began to suspect something was wrong. Ambushes occurred too frequently. Tactics became increasingly suicidal. Morale plummeted. Then came the final blow. Krell ordered 2 clone battalions to engage a new enemy position, without knowing that the enemy was another clone unit, wearing recently stolen Umbran gear. The 501st and the 212th Republic brothers fired upon each other. The result was tragic. Dozens dead, killed by their own, when the mistake was realized. Horror rippled through the ranks. Grief turned to rage, and the clones began to whisper the unthinkable. What if Krell was trying to destroy them? Rebellion in the ranks. Captain Rex confronted Krell. He demanded answers, but Krell remained cold, unmoved by the slaughter. Dogma, ever the loyalist, refused to accept treason. But Fives and Jesse pushed for mutiny. In secret, the clones set a trap. They captured Krell with stun rounds and locked him away. The evidence came quickly. Krell had contacted Dooku. He had planned to join the Sith. His reason: he believed the Republic would foreland the Jedi Order with it. He wanted to be on the winning side. His betrayal wasn't out of madness. It was cold calculation. A Jedi had turned against his own. The execution, the clones faced a decision no soldier should ever have to make. They had captured a Jedi general. They had proof of treason. And now, someone had to carry out the sentence. Rex couldn't do it. Dogma, who had defended Krell, until the very end stepped forward, and in silence he fired. Pong Krell fell, lightsabers silent, eyes cold. For the first time, the clones had taken justice into their own hands, not for revenge, but for survival. What Umbara meant, the Battle of Umbara, was not remembered as a victory. It was remembered as a wound. It showed that trust could be broken, even from within, that not all Jedi lived by the code, that even clones engineered for obedience could choose conscience over command. For Captain Rex, it was a turning point. His faith in the Jedi had been shaken. His sense of duty now included protecting his men, not just following orders. 4, 5s, and others. It planted a seed that would later lead to revelations about Order 66 and the chips hidden in there. Minds. Umbara taught the clones a truth the Republic had tried to ignore. They were people. They had limits, and they had the right to question. The Jedi didn't ask when. Reports of Krell's death reached Coruscant. The Jedi Council didn't press for details. They accepted the report. Another casualty, another betrayal, buried beneath a growing pile of war crimes and silence. But in the silence of the barracks, the clones remembered, and so did Rex. On a world without sunlight, the 500 first found a new kind of clarity, not from orders, not from Jedi wisdom, but from truth. They were soldiers, yes, but they were brothers first, and when pushed to the edge, they stood together, even when it meant turning against the very command that created them. In the shadows of Umbra, loyalty evolved, and the Jedi never saw. Becoming. Chapter 6. Betrayals, Losses, and Heartbreak. Maul's Return. Mandalorian War. And Obi-Wan's greatest wound, a phantom reawakens, the dust-covered junk world of Lotho Minor. Buried beneath scrap and madness, something stirred, something long believed dead, something filled with rage. Over a decade earlier, Obi-Wan Kenobi had struck down Darth Maltha Zabrok, assassin of the Sith, killer of Qui-Gon Jinn, cleaving him in two during the battle on Naboo. His fall into a reactor shaft had seemed final, but hate, as the Sith had long taught, is a powerful fuel, and Maul's hatred of Obi-Wan, of the Jedi, of Sidious himself, burned so deeply that it kept him alive. Clinging to the Force and madness, Maul survived. His body, broken, was replaced with scrap metal limbs. His mind shattered, filled with vengeance. He had become less than a man and more than a monster. Savage, oppressed, the lost brother while Maul lingered in obscurity. His presence was felt through the Force. Sensing a disturbance, Mother Talzin, matriarch of the Night Sisters of Dathomir, sent her son, savage, oppressed, to find the lost Zabrok and return him home. Savage, a fierce warrior empowered by dark magic, journeyed across the galaxy. When he found Maul, he did not see a Sith Lord. He found a creature guttural, filthy, lost in madness. But slowly, Maul remembered, not who he was, but who he hated. Obi-1. The Jedi who had destroyed his future. And with Talzin's help, Maul's mind was restored. his body rebuilt with cybernetic legs, his rage sharpened like a blade. Darth Maul was reborn, a new kind of Sith, but Maul was no longer Sidious's apprentice. He had been abandoned, replaced, forgotten. And so he forged his own path, not as a servant, but as a rival. He sought not galactic conquest, but personal vengeance. He would create chaos, not to rule, but to hurt those who had taken everything from him. To do so, he needed an army, and he knew exactly where to find one. Death Watch and the Mandalorian. Civil War. The Mandalorian moon of Concordia had long hidden the militant group known as Death Watch warriors, who rejected Mandalore's peaceful ways under Duchess Satine. They believed in strength, in armor, in the old ways. Their leader, Prelude, shared Maul's hatred of the Jedi. The two struck an uneasy alliance. Together, they began recruiting criminal syndicates, Black Sun, Pike Syndicate, and the Hutt cartels. This shadow network became known as the Shadow Collectiver, coalition of underworld power, with Maul at its center. With this force, they invaded Mandalore, not through brute assault, but through manipulation. Maul orchestrated a series of attacks across the planet, then allowed Death Watch to defeat the criminals they themselves had unleashed. The people, desperate for protection, turned to Prelude as their savior. The coup was bloodless, the deception perfect. But then Vizsla made a mistake. The duel for Mandalore with Mandalore under his control. Vizsla betrayed Maul, imprisoning him. But Maul was no longer weak. He escaped, challenged Vizsla to single combat, and in a brutal duel defeated him, claiming the ancient Darksaber, symbol of Mandalorian leadership. In Mandalorian culture, power is earned by strength, and so the warriors of Death Watch kneeled, not for honor, not for belief, but for fear. Maul ruled Mandalore and his First Order. Bring me Obi-Wan Kenobi. Return. When word reached Coruscant that Mandalore had fallen to criminal forces, Duchess Satine, now a political prisoner, smuggled a desperate plea to the Jedi. The Council debated, but politics restrained them. Mandalore was neutral. Intervention could collapse already fragile alliances, so they did nothing. But Obi-Wan could not ignore the message. He had loved Satine once, perhaps still did. She was more than a politician. She was a symbol of peace and of everything Obi-Wan had chosen to walk away from without orders. He left the temple and flew to Mandalore alone, the trap upon arrival. Obi-Wan was ambushed and captured, chained and helpless. He was forced to witness Maul's twisted spectacle. The execution of Duchess Satine, stabbed through the chest with the Darksaber in Obi-Wan's arms. Her final words were simple. I've always loved you. I always will. And then she was gone. It was a blow unlike any Obi-Wan had ever endured. Maul didn't want just revenge. He wanted suffering. And he had delivered it. Obi-Wan's escape, but Obi-Wan survived, with help from Bo-Katan, Satine's sister. A former Death Watch warrior turned rebel, he escaped the palace and fled the planet. Bo-Katan now carried the flame of resistance. Her loyalty had once been to strength, but now it was to justice. She vowed to free Mandalore from Maul's grip, but she would not forget the cost, nor would Obi-Wan. Maul's hollow throne despite his victory. Maul felt no peace. He ruled from a throne of violence, but power was not purpose. He had no ideology, no people, no future, only rage. He knew Sidious would come. He knew this empire he had built would not last. But he welcomed the end, because for Maul, the war was never about victory. It was about vengeance, and vengeance, once fulfilled, leaves only ash on Mandalore. The war changed shape, no longer a clash of armies, but of personal pain, of betrayal and love, of ghosts and revenge. Obi-Wan lost the woman he could never have. Maul regained the power he had once been denied, and the Jedi lost something more subtler, symbol of hope. Satine's dream of peaceful neutrality died with her, and with it, a part of the galaxy's soul. Ahsoka's trial and the breaking of trust, the burden of war as battles raged across the galaxy. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant stood, tall gleaming, serene, untouched by fire. But within its marble walls, cracks had begun to form, not in stone, but in spirit. The Jedi had become soldiers, not sages. Their robes bore dust from trenches, not meditation chambers, and their minds, once devoted to peace, were clouded by politics, pride, and fear. It was in this atmosphere of growing mistrust that the Jedi would commit one of their gravest mistakes, and they would lose one of their brightest lights. A bomb in the temple. The explosion shook the foundations of the temple. A bomb smuggled into the Jedi archives, detonated without warning, killing workers, clones, and civilians. Panic spread. Coruscant reeled. For the first time, the Jedi were seen not as protectors, but as vulnerable, flawed, even dangerous. An investigation began immediately. Evidence pointed toward a Jedi being responsible, and suspicion quickly turned to someone unexpected: Ahsoka Tano. The framing of a Jedi Ahsoka had been on Coruscant during the attack. She had access to restricted areas, banned, most damning. Security footage appeared to show her fleeing the scene. The Jedi Council, pressured by the Senate and desperate to prove their neutrality, did the unthinkable. They stripped Ahsoka of her rank, removed her from the Jedi Order, and handed her over to the Republic military court for trial. No defense, no protection, no loyalty, just silence. Anakin's belief, only one voice rose in her defense: Anakin Skywalker. He refused to believe she was guilty. He knew her heart, her integrity, her loyalty. While the council distanced themselves, Anakin went underground, chasing leads, interrogating contacts, and risking his own standing. He eventually discovered the truth. Barris's Offie, a fellow Jedi Knight, had orchestrated the bombing to protest the Order's hypocrisy. She had grown disillusioned, watching the Jedi become tools of war, complicit in suffering. Her actions were wrong, but her criticisms struck deeply. Anakin confronted Barris's and brought her to justice. But for Ahsoka, it was too late. The trial and its aftermath, the charges against Ahsoka, were dropped. The council, now full of regret, offered to reinstate her. But the damage was done. In their rush to protect their image, they had betrayed their own. They had spoken of justice, but acted with fear. They had called her a Padawan, but treated her like a criminal. Ahsoka stood before them, silent, and then, with quiet strength, she turned and walked away. Why she left? She left not because of the accusation, not because of the pain, but because she had seen the truth. The Jedi had lost their way. They had forgotten what it meant to listen, to trust, to stand for the voiceless. They had become so entangled in the Republic's machinery that they no longer knew how to serve the Force. And so Ahsoka stepped into the unknown. No title, no lightsaber, no order. Just her beliefs. And her clarity. Anakin's silent grief for Anakin. Her departure was a wound that never healed. He had trained her, fought beside her, trusted her, and now he had lost her not to death, but to choice. It was a loss he took personally. Another abandonment, another sign that everything he held dear was slipping away, and deep inside, something cracked, not loudly, not yet, but undeniably. What the Council never saw. The Council believed they had done the right thing. They believed that reinstating Ahsoka would fix everything. But they had revealed something far more dangerous, that even the Jedi could be afraid, that they would sacrifice one of their own to maintain appearances. That trust, once broken, does not return on command. Ahsoka had been their future. Now she was gone. The symbolism of her departure, Ahsoka's decision, shook more than just the order. It sent a message to the clones who admired her, to the younglings who followed her. Example, to the senators who watched with unease, that the Jedi were not infallible, and that the galaxy was changing. She left in silence. No farewell ceremony, no lightsaber salute, just footsteps echoing through a temple that had lost its way. Ahsoka Tano walked away from the Jedi, not because she stopped believing in them, but because they stopped believing in themselves. Chapter 7. Approaching the final days, Jedi generals, Outer Rim sieges, and the rise of Palpatine. The war nears its end as the Clone Wars entered its final year. The galaxy changed in ways no one could fully see except for one man, Chancellor Palpatine, from his office atop the highest spire on Coruscant. He watched everything: Jedi deployments, Senate votes, supply lines, assassination attempts, every shift in strategy, because he had designed them all. He was not just leading a republic. He was playing both sides of a war he had created, shaping the galaxy to his will, one crisis at a time. And while the galaxy burned, the Jedi kept fighting, never realizing they were marching toward their own extinction. The Jedi, as generals by now, almost every Jedi, young and old, had become a military commander. They led fleets, assigned battalions, proved bombardments. They reviewed casualty reports, ordered tactical withdrawals, and sat in war rooms instead of meditation chambers. They were no longer guardians of peace. They were generals of war. Even Yoda, who had once warned against aggression, now commanded campaigns from the front lines. Even Mace Windu, once skeptical of politics, became a permanent fixture in the Republic's War Council. It was not corruption, it was exhaustion. The Jedi were doing what they thought was necessary. But necessity is a slow poison. The Outer Rim, Sieges the War's final phase, focused on the Outer Rim territories, the last major strongholds of the Separatists. These battles were long, bloody, and strategically complex. Thousands of systems remained loyal to Dooku's cause, either out of fear or desperation. The Jedi were stretched thin, divided across dozens of simultaneous campaigns. Obi-Wan Kenobi fought on Utapau, chasing whispers of General Grievous's last known location. Anakin Skywalker led siege operations over Anaxis, coordinating clone and fleet movements with a new squad, Clone Force 99. Known as the Bad Batch. Yoda commanded forces in the deep Outer Rim, far from the Temple, disconnected from the Council's daily decisions. Each Jedi held a piece of the final puzzle, but none could see the whole picture. Only Palpatine could, because he was the puzzle. A galaxy militarized, the Republic's economy had become entirely dependent on war. Shipyards operated day and night. Kamino's cloning facilities expanded at double capacity. Entire planetary industries were repurposed for armor, weapons, and logistics. Senators, once peacekeepers, became brokers of military funding. Debate in the Senate was no longer about diplomacy, but about deployment schedules. Palpatine's emergency powers, granted at the start of the war, had never been revoked, and few questioned it. Why would they? The war was almost over. Grievous was cornered. Dooku was in hiding. Victory was near, or so they believed. The growing darkness in Anakin. In the middle of all this stood Anakin Skywalker, war hero, Jedi Knight, chosen one. He had won battle after battle, saved lives, inspired loyalty, but inside he was fraying. Ahsoka was gone. Palm was distant. The Council still mistrusted him. And worse, he was having visions. Dark, terrifying dreams of pardon. Dying in childbirth, screaming, reaching for him. And then going still. No matter what he did. The dream returned. He told no one, not even Obi-Wan, because the last time he had warned the Jedi about a vision, his mother's death, they had dismissed him, and that death had come true. He would not let it happen again. Palpatine's quiet control, the Chancellor saw it all. He watched Anakin struggle, listened, comforted, advised, not as a Sith, but as a friend. He was the only one who listened. The only one who didn't scold him for his emotions. The only one who offered a solution. The dark side of the Force offers powers some consider to be unnatural. It wasn't a command. It was a whisper, a seed, one that would take root in Anakin's fear. The Jedi begin to suspect back in the Temple. Mace Windu sensed something was wrong. The war was ending, but the Chancellor wasn't stepping down. He still held emergency powers, still appointed generals, still received classified intel before the Jedi Council. It didn't feel like leadership. It felt like rule. Yoda voiced concern as well, but from afar, too far. The Order was scattered, fragmented, tired. They no longer acted with unity, and that made them vulnerable. The calm. Before the storm, the Jedi believed that once Grievous and Dooku were defeated, the war would end. They were wrong, because the war was never the point. The Clone Wars were a smokescreen, a long, brutal distraction, a forge designed to weaken the Republic's soul and prepare the galaxy for a different kind of peace. The peace of control, of empire, of fear. This was the final breath before the fall. The war was almost won. The Republic almost saved. The Jedi still fighting. But none of them saw the noose tightening. None of them felt the last light flickering. None of them heard the words that would soon echo across the stars. Execute Order 66. Echo's rescue. Final missions, and the last moves. Of Palpatine whispers of the end the Republic was winning. That's what the Senate believed. That's what the Jedi wanted to believe. The Separatists were fracturing. Dooku was in hiding. General Grievous had lost ground across the Outer Rim. World after world returned to the Republic. But behind the scenes, nothing was truly ending. Because the end had already been written by the man orchestrating both sides. And as the Jedi closed in on their enemies, they unknowingly stepped into the final phase of the war. A phase designed to finish them. The Siege of Anaxes and the Bad. Batch 1 of the last major battles before the fall took place on the planet Anaxizan, industrial stronghold critical to Republic supply lines. Republic forces, led by Anakin Skywalker, found themselves losing ground. Outmaneuvered by droid commanders who seemed to predict their every move. Clone. Commander Cody proposed a radical idea. Bring in an unorthodox team. Enter Clone Force 99, named the Bad Batch. They were clones like no others, genetically altered, each with unique mutations and specialized skills. Hunter, the silent tracker tech, the brilliant analyst tracker, the brute with a heart crosshair, the sharpshooter with icy precision. They didn't follow protocol, but they got results. The return, bulk of Echo during the mission. The team discovered a signal, one that should not have existed. It matched the neural patterns of Echo. A clone trooper believed to have died during the Citadel mission years earlier. Anakin and Rex, refusing to abandon a brother, launched a covert operation to find him. What they uncovered was chilling. Echo was alive, barely held in stasis by the Techno-Union. His brain connected to a data node. They had used him to predict clone movements, turning his memories into algorithms. He had been turned into a weapon against his own kind. But he still remembered who he was, and he still trusted Rex. Free will and brotherhood, they rescued Echo, disabled the Techno-Union facility, and returned him to Republic lines. But Echo had changed. His body was septic, his mind fragmented. The other clones saw it. So did he. He no longer fit. And so, in a moment of quiet strength, Echo made a choice. He left the regular army and joined the Bad Batcher team of outsiders. Like him, for Rex, it was bittersweet. He had saved his brother, but had to let him go for Echo. It was the first time in years he was truly free. Palpatine's final moves, while Jedi and clones celebrated another hard-won victory. Palpatine prepared the final strokes of his plan. Count Dooku, his apprentice and puppet, was now expendable. General Grievous, a manufactured monster, had served his purpose. The Senate, once an obstacle, was under his total control, but there remained one unpredictable variable: Anakin Skywalker. Palpatine had nurtured his trust for years through mentorship, kindness, and secrets. But he needed Anakin to fall, and for that he needed leverage. He found it in Anakin's visions. Visions of death. Anakin's dreams of Padma's death grew darker, more vivid. No longer just nightmares, they were warnings. He saw her crying, reaching for him, then falling still. He begged the Jedi Council for guidance. They told him to let go. That fear led to attachment. That attachment led to the dark side. But they didn't understand. Podmore's a symbol to him. She was everything. So he turned to the only one who would listen. The only one who offered a solution. The only one who whispered, "To cheat death is a power only one has achieved. But if we work together, I know we can discover the secret." Anakin's isolation, the Council grew wary. They denied Anakin the rank of Master, assigned him to spy on the Chancellor, his mentor, to protect the Republic. Yes, but also because they feared him, and Anakin felt it. Every glance, every whisper. He was not one of them. Not truly. And that loneliness, the same one he had carried since childhood, became unbearable. The pieces aligned. Palpatine knew he had seen every decision, every failure, every doubt, and now everything was ready. The Jedi were scattered across distant systems. The clones were obedient, waiting for a command they didn't know they carried. Anakin was wounded, afraid, desperate to save the one he loved. Death remained was a trigger, a spark, a final push, and then the Republic would fall. Echo was rescued. Anaxes was won. The Senate praised the Jedi. The war was nearly over, but none of it mattered, because the Jedi had already lost, not through battle, but through blindness. They had been fighting shadows, while the Sith moved in light. And now the end was only one order away. Chapter 8: The Siege of Mandalore, and the end of an Ahsoka's return. The siege begins, and Maul's vision of doom. The final arc begins. The Republic believed the war was ending. But for the Jedi, the final battle was not on Coruscant. It was on Mandalore, world of warriors, loyalty, and civil unrest. A world once ruled by a peaceful duchess, now overrun by a criminal Sith. And at the center of it all stood two exiles. One, a Jedi who left the Order in search of truth. The other, a Sith who had been cast aside, and now saw too clearly what was coming. The Siege of Mandalore was not just the last battle of the Clone Wars. It was the moment when everything, the war, the Republic, the Jedi began to break. Ahsoka Tano returns after leaving the Jedi Order. Ahsoka Tano drifted through the galaxy in quiet exile. She helped those in need, asked no reward, and spoke little of her past. But war, like gravity, pulled everything inward. When she encountered Bo-Katan Kryze, sister of the fallen Duchess Satine, Ahsoka was faced with a choice that Bo-Katan had uncovered. A dangerous truth. Maul had returned and taken full control of Mandalore. He ruled not as a king, but as a shadow, manipulating the criminal underworld. Puppeteering fear, Bo-Katan had the will to fight. What she lacked was an army. Ahsoka knew she could never return to the Jedi Council, but she could return to the fight. The division of Fortress Ahsoka and Bo-Katan approached Obi-Wan and Anakin for help. At first, the Council hesitated. Mandalore was not part of the Republic. Official intervention would be seen as invasion. But the urgency was undeniable. Maul's presence changed everything, and so a compromise was struck. Anakin and Obi-Wan would remain on Coruscant, where a new separatist strike was imminent. But Ahsoka, no longer a Jedi, yet trusted, would lead a detachment of the 501st Legion to Mandalore. With Captain Rex at her side, Anakin gave her back her lightsabers repaired, upgraded their blades. Now glowed a cool, dignified blue. "They're yours," he said softly, "like you always were." It was the last time they saw each other as friends. The siege begins. The Republic's forces arrived in orbit over Mandalore and descended fast. Bo-Katan's resistance fighters stormed the city alongside clone troopers, while Ahsoka led aerial squads through the narrow skies of Sindari. The battle was fierce and complex, a clash of culture, politics, and destiny. Maul had expected them. He allowed the siege to begin, because Maul wasn't fighting for Mandalore. He was fighting for revenge and revelation. Maul's vision in the shadows beneath the capital. Maul sat alone, meditating. Not on power, but on fear, because Maul, unlike the Jedi, had seen the storm approaching. He had felt it in the Force, the dark side rising like a tide. He knew what the Jedi could not. Darth Sidious was making his final move. The Republic was already lost. The Jedi were already dead. Maul didn't care about ruling Mandalore anymore. He cared about survival, because he had seen the future, and at the center of it stood Skywalker. The trap Maul lured Ahsoka into the depths of the city. There, amid the orange glow of industrial ruins, he revealed what no one else knew. Sidious has been playing a game far greater than you imagine. He's chosen someone close to you, Skywalker. Ahsoka was stunned. She rejected it. Anakin was her brother, her master, her hero. He could never fall, but Maul insisted. He begged her to join him, not out of manipulation, but desperation. He needed help to stop what was coming. She refused, because she still believed in the Jedi. She still believed in him. The duel, their lightsabers clashed in a flurry of motion, blue against red, grace against fury. The duel was fast, ferocious, and unlike any before. Maul fought not to dominate, but to escape to warn the galaxy before it was too late. Ahsoka fought not to kill, but to stop the chaos. On the surface above them, man burned. Below, two exiles battled over a truth neither could fully hold. Maul's capture in the end. Ahsoka prevailed, with the help of clone troopers and Bo-Katan's forces. Maul was subdued, screaming, shaking, warning anyone who would listen. "You don't know what you've done. We're all going to burn." He was placed in a ray-shielded containment chamber once used to imprison rogue Force users. Ahsoka, shaken but steady, ordered his transport to the flagship above. The battle was over, victory declared, but peace did not return, because, as the shuttle lifted off, elsewhere across the stars, Order 66 was moments away. Mandalore had been reclaimed. Ahsoka had returned to the front. Maul had been defeated, but nothing had truly been won. Because, while armies fought and empires clashed, the real war, the one for the soul of the galaxy, was already lost, and no one saw it coming, except the Sith. And soon it would be too late. Order 66, the fall of the Jedi, and the rise of the Empire. Sudden silence. Ahsoka stood aboard the Republic cruiser, watching Maul locked away in silence. Around her, the clones of the 500 first moved, refueling, preparing for return. Captain Rex stood at her side, quiet as ever. They had won. Mandalore had been taken, Maul had been captured, and somewhere far away, Anakin Skywalker had been sent on a final mission to rescue Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous. No one knew that he had already succeeded. No one knew what had happened in those dark moments with Count Dooku, and no one could hear what was about to echo across the stars. Execute Order 66. The transmission came without warning. A voice called, "Code, Absolute Chancellor Palpatine." And with those 3 words, the galaxy shifted. Every clone trooper across every battlefield received the same command. No questions, no hesitation. The Jedi are traitors to the Republic. Eliminate them. On Felucia, Aayla Secura was shot in the back. On Seleucami, Saint Alley was blasted off her speeder. On Magito, Kiadimundi was cut down by the soldiers he had led for years. And in the temple on Coruscant, children were not spared. Rex hesitates aboard the cruiser. Ahsoka felt it, a tremor in the Force, a scream across 1,000 systems. She turned to Rex's hands, shaking, breath uneven. He dropped his helmet. "Find 5s." He choked. Then his hands moved. He raised his blasters and fired. Ahsoka deflected, not to harm, just to survive. Clones she had laughed with, fought beside, bled forth. They turned on her without hesitation. She fled into the corridors, stunned, not by the betrayal, but by the speed. Everything had changed in an instant. The truth about the chips hiding in the ship's shadows. Ahsoka captured Rex and brought him to the droids for medical help. There, using the Force, she reached into his mind. "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me." And slowly, The inhibitor chip the programming implanted years ago was located and removed. When Rex awoke, his tears came quickly. He remembered what he had done, and what he had almost done. The clones had no choice. They were weapons, turned on command. Maul's chaos in a desperate move. Ahsoka freed Maul not to ally with him, but to create a distraction. Unleashed, Maul tore through the cruiser. He didn't fight clones. He slaughtered them, not out of hatred, but opportunity. He knew the galaxy was ending, and he wanted to watch. Burn. As Maul disabled the ship's hyperdrive, Ahsoka and Rex raced against time. The ship was crashing. The clones were hunting, and freedom. Get was nearly gone. The crash and the graves, the cruiser descended into the atmosphere of a moonflamen, breaking apart. Ahsoka and Rex made it to an escape pod just in time. The wreckage fell in silence. When it was over, the bodies of clone troopers lay scattered across the field, still in the paint of the 501st. Still loyal to a war they never truly understood. Ahsoka and Rex buried them, each grave marked, each helmet placed with care. She left behind her lightsaber, placed at the site as a final farewell to the Jedi she once was. The Jedi were gone, and Ahsoka Tano was no longer among them. The rise of the Empire far above. On Coruscant, the Senate gathered under emergency orders. Chancellor Palpatine, face twisted, from battle with Mace Windu, stood before them, and with smooth, solemn words, he declared, "The remaining Jedi will be hunted down and defeated. The attempt on my life has left me scarred, but my resolve has never been stronger. In order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire." The applause was thunderous, not from joy, but from relief. The war was over. Peace had returned, and the darkness had begun. Anakin Skywalker, no Marin, the shadows of the temple. Anakin knelt before his new master. The name Anakin was discarded. From that moment forward, he was known only as Darth Vader. The Chosen One had not brought balance. Not yet. He had brought ruin. But from ruin, the Sith believed, would rise a new order. One controlled not by justice, but by fear. Rex and Ahsoka disappearing the ashes of war. Rex and Ahsoka vanished. They went into hiding, knowing the Empire would hunt them both. They carried no banners. No plans for rebellion. Only memory. Only grief. Only survival. The war was over, not with a victory, but with a transformation. The Republic had died with thunderous applause. The Jedi had fallen in silence. The clones had fulfilled their purpose only, to be discarded, and the galaxy had entered a new era, ruled by shadows, guarded by stormtroopers, enforced by a former hero in black. The Clone Wars began with hope, with a rescue on Gunnis's, with promises of peace and protection, but they ended with graves. With betrayal, with fire, and with silence. From it all, a lesson remains. Even the brightest light can be manipulated. Even the greatest warriors can fall. And sometimes, the war we think we're fighting is only a distraction from the one we already lost.